I kind of have the feeling that I might get a little bit sick, and just in case it gets worse, I wanted to make this review before that until my brain is not completely mushy, so I hope it's okay. But otherwise, the HTC U Ultra. There is a lot of controversy going on about this phone. The bigger YouTubers kind of bash it, say it's a waste of space and so on. The smaller kind of underground YouTubers, like they call themselves, are kind of defending it and praising it as kind of one of the best phablets out there. Me, myself, personally, I would say I'm kind of in between. Whatever that means, we will see. So let's get into the first big thing. Yes, the size. We have to just compare it with a few similar phones. The HTC U Ultra is a 5.7-inch phone with a 3000 mAh battery and a secondary screen. The Huawei Mate 9 is a 5.9-inch phone with a 4000 mAh battery. So as you can see, noticeably shorter, even narrower, and also thinner. So this shows that it is in some way a waste of space. I don't know actually how they managed to cram that little tech into this. Then we have here the Mi Mix, which has a 6.4-inch display and an even bigger battery. And as you can see, still shorter, a little bit wider though, but just about as thick. So this shows that it is definitely a huge phone, no matter what. I have to say though, there are some good sides about it, because I have to say it feels great, even though I don't get quite one thing, because as you can maybe see here, there is this transition between the glass and the metal, and this is not quite seamless, so you can feel it. It's not sharp or anything like that, but for a phone that is built otherwise so super nice, this could have been done even nicer. But I guess to say, yeah, it will attract fingerprints. Do I care? No, because I like glass phones and this one is no exception. Of course, one and usability will be quite hard, especially since HTC is not a big fan of symmetry, because as you can see here, the buttons are not in the middle. They could have raised this a little bit, especially the back button, as you can see, is super low on top. And as you can already see, I almost can't reach it at all. I have two short fingers. It's not an issue for me because I use my side bezel gestures. That's why I'm okay with that. But for people with shorter fingers, you will definitely need two hands. Otherwise, we have a nice curve on the back that you can see, at least towards the sides, which makes this slightly bigger phone definitely nice to hold on. So I definitely like that. On the sides, it's also a little bit curved, but grippy, so I like that. The buttons, I have to say, great placement, absolutely, and they feel great. Very meaty click, great tactile feedback, I like that. A few people seem to have a problem with the camera protruding. Personally, yeah, not an issue for me, but yeah, it's there. A SD card and SIM card tray, then we have the microphone, nothing on the left. On the bottom we can see USB Type-C, a microphone on the right, and on the left, one of the speaker for the two speaker setup placement for the highs here on the earpiece. We have a notification LED. We have a secondary screen that I won't really get any more into that, as I did already by now, because I think it's a total gimmick. I turned it off like after one day because it was just nothing. It was nothing to me. Fingerprint reader, I have to say, works really reliable, fast. It's maybe not the fastest one out there, and it's a little bit low in terms of placement, like I said. And what I personally don't like so much is that it vibrates every time, but that's a minor thing. Now let's get into the display. And yeah, a few people actually say it's a beautiful, crazy, great display. I'm not quite so sure, because this is a weird display. What you can change is the color temperature. That's already pretty much it. But this display in some ways looks different than any other phone that I've seen. And only HTC has this kind of quite unique calibration, which is a little bit off. I can't really say if it's for good or not, but it looks just different. In terms of maximum brightness, 500 lux. I couldn't really read out the minimum one because that was just too low to measure actually. Viewing angles are stable, even though it doesn't look quite so much like this on the screen. White is absolutely nice. Blacks are actually really good, but definitely still far off from an AMOLED display. But I'm just not quite sure what I should think about the colors, because especially some things like also some over sharpening that is visible at sometimes, and some slightly weaker contrast just make it for me a really good display, but not quite an extremely like high-end flagship display. But it is super satisfying, don't get me wrong, but it's just a little bit weird, and it's hard for me to actually explain why. Now the speaker. As you already heard, the majority of the sound is coming from the bottom where the mids and the bass are. The top is just pretty much for the highs. Even though I have to say, For some reason, indoors, the speaker actually doesn't sound all that loud, but outdoors, when I was at work, it sounded actually really loud. So that's something a little bit confusing to me, but the sound overall is quite good. It could be a little bit richer, a little bit warmer, but otherwise it gets the job just nicely. I would say still it's a quite good, just not yet very good speaker, but definitely above good. Headphone jack, I can't really judge that because there is none, and the stock earphones that you get with, in my opinion, are also just maybe quite good because they sounded out of the box a little bit weird. Once you do the U Sonic sound adjustment, they sounded way nicer, but still a little bit more on the bassy side, quite clean and good quality, but I would wish for a little bit more volume, and what I'm judging right now is pretty much just the earphone and not the headphone jack, so really that's not quite the same thing. So let's get into the performance. Let's end all apps and launch a few ones. As you can see, those definitely launch very quick, and it is definitely a snappy device. It doesn't feel, for some reason though, quite as quick as, for example, the HTC 10 did. But if we just check the browser here once again, we will see that the performance is absolutely almost great. And yes, I know this sounds weird, even though it has the Snapdragon 821, which definitely should perform great. I see some minor slowdowns quite often though. So it's not 100% consistent speed, but browsing performance is great. And usually the scrolling is super nice and super smooth. But there is always this slight little super micro stutter, like almost nano stutter, that just takes it away from being great. And it is a flagship performer, yes, but not quite on the highest level. I've seen just better ones. Multitasking though is absolutely fine as well. And overall, don't get me wrong, it performs super nice. But there are super nicer ones, if you get what I mean. But I don't want to sound too harsh, it is still a top-notch performer. And the same also goes for gaming. Yes, you push a higher resolution, and therefore the Snapdragon 821 has some slight little trouble, and therefore you will see a few middle, like kleiner frame drops and also frame skipping and so on. But really minor, because usually the frame rates are on a quite high level. You can play all games very nice. What you will notice though, that the device heats up a little bit more than usually, especially even in normal use, just browsing and so on, the device gets warm. Not hot at all, and maybe after a longer period of time it could actually throttle, which is not so much a big issue, but the device is made out of glass, so you will just feel the warmth a little bit more, but I would still say this is absolutely fine. Let's talk about the battery, which is quite a big thing, especially since it is not a big battery. So full charge takes about 1 hour and 40. That's super quick, that's great. 1 hour of YouTube though, about 16%. That's on the lower end, what I've seen recently. And about the battery life, it is a mixed thing. Because when I did my first day on Wi-Fi only, I got about 5 hours and I thought, ooh, that's not that good. And considering from my experience, I expect like 3.5 hours on mobile data. But there I got also 4 to 4.5. So this is the phone with the smallest difference between mobile data and Wi-Fi that I've ever had. So if I would have to judge just mobile data, I would say that's actually really good. If I would have to judge it separately, though, which in this case I have to, Wi-Fi, then I would say that's decent. So overall, it's actually surprisingly not that bad. In overall, actually quite good after all. So I expected way worse, and if they would have crammed the 4000 mAh battery in it, which I think would have been possible, it would have been actually great. So let's talk about software. Here we have the lock screen with lock screen shortcuts that you can use, but it's not available without a SIM, I think. Otherwise, as you can see here, this is their launcher. They have a little bit of a different arrangement for the app drawer. The quick settings, they look a lot like stock. You can rearrange them, this is nice. Of course, you have the percentage tile and so on. In terms of software, there is not all that much to say because we have some finger gestures and so on. Otherwise, I really don't really know because it is quite a stock Android feeling device by now, I have to say that. But you have, for example, the U Sonic option that is not available since I don't have headphones right now in, but yeah. So I would say let's just stick with that. It looks and feels more like stock Android, actually more than on the HTC 10. We are already using Nougat. It's a very, I would say, quite lean software UI, so all is good here. I like it, definitely better than on the HTC 10, and it's solid, absolutely fine. So let's get into the camera. What I have to say about the selfies is that they, for some reason, look a little bit pale and not quite as contrasty for me. Sharpness, I would say, is mostly okay, but sometimes, as you can see here, it's not quite that sharp. So I would say it's a quite good selfie cam, but because most of the time it just wasn't super sharp, and it always felt a little bit flat or pale to me. But yeah, The video though, I have to say, actually looks quite nice. As you can see, pretty much also a little bit of a softness, which is a general thing of this camera, because here, for example, a pic with the flash and here without, you will see that low light pictures are also quite good, because everything on this camera for some reason feels softer. Maybe I'm used to more over sharpened pictures usually, otherwise I've seen, but as you can see here, every edge looks ever so slightly like softened out. And that's why I'm just not super impressed, because colors are mostly accurate. Sometimes they are a little bit off as the display itself, but even on a monitor you will see that. But usually autofocus works mostly good, not always super good. It is a little bit on the unreliable side, because I had to just sometimes use autofocus, tap to focus a little bit more often than I would have wished to. But it's better than many other phones. As you can see here, it's just never 100% sharp as I would expect it to. But otherwise, very good for sure still after all, because you can get great pictures, especially if you use it. But then there are also these pictures that kind of look just artificial in some way. It's a little bit hard to explain, but otherwise landscape photos look absolutely nice. And here, this would be 4K. I won't really show off 1080p because there was not big of a difference and we didn't have 1080p 60. But as you can see, some minor artifacting is going on, but usually I would say the bitrate is quite okay. And the video actually looks nice. We have a little bit of a pump sometimes, but usually a mostly quite subtle autofocus. And as you can see here, it makes an absolutely nice job, because it is otherwise a nice sharp cam. I've seen better 4K cameras, but this one is definitely one of the better ones after all. So that's why I would say, let's already jump into the pros and cons. And here I want to call out definitely that the device feels absolutely great, especially with the very good buttons and the really good fingerprint reader. The device has, in my opinion, a really good display. I've already said why it's not quite maybe great or very good. It's just a little bit weird. Quite good speaker after all, I've seen better ones, but the arrangement is still one of the betters. Then we have a good stock earphone available out of the box, even though that's a little bit hard to judge, but it's nice to see at least something better out there after all. Almost great performance, as I said. A little bit inconsistency was there. Really good battery life on mobile data, decent battery life on Wi-Fi, and in my opinion, a very good software. When it comes to the cam, as I said, a quite good selfie cam, quite good low light cam, and video and photo camera though are very good, almost actually great in some ways, but the little bit of softness what was taking me away from that. In terms of the not so great sides, yes, I have to just say it's huge no matter what. There is some slightly over sharpening visible at times, and the display, like I said, looks a little bit different. Doesn't it really mean that it's a negative thing, and some people might actually even prefer it. There is no headphone jack. Performance, like I said, is not 100% consistent. Pics tend to look slightly soft. In my opinion, the second screen is a complete gimmick. I didn't use it at all, and the value just isn't all that great. And already talking about value, in the US, I've heard around that it's available right now, especially on sale already now for about $600. And yes, value is definitely better than at first where it was like $750. But still, 600 is quite a lot, because for 600 in the US even you get the Mate 9, which I think is the slightly more polished product after all. Yes, there are some pros and cons to that, and you could prefer this one for some reasons as you could the other one. It's really comes down to, but getting back to what the big YouTubers and the small YouTubers say, just to get that out of the way real quick, and that's my subjective opinion. I don't think it deserved all the flack that it got, being too big and so on, because there are many big phones out there, and if you have a 5.7 incher, if it's even a little bit bigger than maybe necessary, I don't see this to be an issue, so it doesn't deserve to be hated on, because it's just a phone. It does what it does, and this actually in most attributes really good, so it's fine. And now let's get into the underground YouTuber opinion that it is one of the best phones. I've seen many that would prefer it over an S8 or some other ones also over a Mate 9, which I kind of get, but I don't see this to be that of an amazing phone. It's a really good one. It has its flaws. It has a lot of its strengths. Personally, it made me think, just like I said, a little bit in between, because I get the good side as I get the bad side, but for a phone, for around 600, I would wish for maybe being more towards the positive sides, because I wasn't quite impressed. But I have to say, my normal daily use experience was a very pleasant one, so I definitely enjoyed my time with it. But if I would use it, if I would recommend it, is maybe up for another video. But that's pretty much all I have to say. I hope you liked this review. I hope it was all you wanted to hear. And otherwise, maybe a thumbs up and a subscription. Until next time, bye.